Today's case is one of shocking betrayal, twisted emotions, and a tragic ending that no one saw coming. So, let's begin. It was Thanksgiving morning at the Amaya household, and the air was alive with a blend of cinnamon, roasting turkey, and pumpkin pie. Golden sunlight filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow across the carefully decorated dining table. Amaya, the family matriarch, bustled between the kitchen and living room, perfecting the smallest details with precision. To everyone else, Amaya seemed like the perfect wife and hostess. Yet beneath her composed demeanor, a nagging doubt gnawed at her. Over the past few months, she had noticed Archer's behavior shift. He was glued to his phone, disappeared with vague excuses, and came home later than usual. These signs felt small at first, dismissed as work stress. But no matter how hard Amaya tried, she couldn't shake the growing suspicion that something was off. By mid-morning, her younger sister, Alora, arrived, carrying a dessert box and wearing her trademark bright smile. But to Amaya, that smile seemed slightly forced, her eyes a bit too guarded. Amaya embraced Alora warmly, but when she pulled away, she caught a flicker of something unsettling, nervousness or guilt. "Everything looks amazing, Amaya," Alora said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've outdone yourself this year." Amaya forced a laugh. Can't have Thanksgiving without overdoing it. The two sisters chuckled, but as they chatted, Amaya noticed Archer across the room sneaking glances at Alora. His gaze lingered too long, just enough to stir a knot in Amaya's chest. It wasn't jealousy yet, but it was suspicion, creeping in like a slow, ominous cloud on a sunny day. The family began to gather, the house filling with cheerful chatter, clinking glasses, and the patter of children's feet. From the outside, it was a picture-perfect holiday, but Amaya could feel the tension bubbling just below the surface. Archer and Alora exchanged glances during small moments, a quick touch of a hand here, a shared laugh there. Amaya's eyes followed every gesture, her heart pounding with the realization that these were no ordinary interactions. When the appetizers were served, Amaya excused herself and went to the kitchen. She needed a moment to breathe, to gather her thoughts before the suspicion consumed her entirely. As she rinsed wine glasses at the sink, Alora joined her, silently slipping into the room. "Need a hand?" Alora asked casually, her voice too light to be genuine. Amaya glanced sideways at her sister. "Sure, you can start on the dishes." The air between them thickened with unspoken words. Amaya's mind raced with questions she didn't dare ask. Finally, she couldn't hold back any longer. "Alora," Amaya said quietly, "is everything okay between you and Archer?" Alora froze, her hand submerged in soapy water. A flicker of panic crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with a nervous laugh. "What? Of course. Everything's fine. Why? Wouldn't it be?" Before Amaya could press further, Archer appeared at the kitchen door, his presence shifting the mood. He wrapped an arm around Amaya's waist, planting a kiss on her cheek. "Everything good in here?" he asked cheerfully, though his eyes flicked quickly between the two sisters. Amaya nodded, her mind racing. Yeah, everything's fine. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Something was brewing, something that would change everything. And once it came to light, their lives would never be the same. The dining room sparkled with Thanksgiving cheer. Candles flickered on the table, casting a warm glow over dishes of mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and golden brown turkey. Laughter echoed as family members settled into their seats, passing plates and exchanging stories. It was the kind of scene that could have come straight from a holiday card, on the surface, at least. Amaya sat across from Archer and Alora, doing her best to immerse herself in conversation. But each time Alora laughed a little too hard at Archer's jokes, or when he poured her wine without being asked, Amaya's stomach tightened. The way they interacted, it wasn't blatant, but it was just enough to set her on edge. From the corner of her eye, Amaya watched as Archer leaned closer to Alora, ostensibly to pass the salt, but instead, he whispered something into her ear. Alora flushed, her face lighting up in a way that made Amaya's heart plummet. It was a fleeting moment, but one charged with meaning. Amaya gripped her fork tighter, her knuckles whitening under the table. Her parents, sitting at the head of the table, carried on, as if everything was fine. They cheerfully recounted old family stories, unaware of the storm gathering beneath the surface. To everyone else, it was just another happy Thanksgiving. Only Amaya could see the cracks forming. When the main course was served, Archer kept up his usual charm, seamlessly blending in with the festive spirit. But Amaya knew him too well. The quick glances exchanged with Alora, the lingering touches, they weren't innocent. Alora, for her part, tried to hide her unease, but Amaya could see the guilt in her sister's eyes every time their gazes met. Then, Aunt Sarah cut through the noise with a playful remark that shattered Amaya's fragile composure. "So, Alora," Aunt Sarah said with a mischievous grin, "when are you going to settle down and find a man of your own? Or are you planning to keep borrowing Archer?" The table erupted in laughter, everyone assuming the comment was just a light-hearted joke. But Alora's face turned ashen, and Archer's smile faltered for the briefest of moments. Amaya's heart raced as she locked eyes with her sister. There it was, the truth, teetering on the edge, ready to spill out at the slightest nudge. Alora forced a brittle laugh. "Oh, come on, Aunt Sarah, it's not like that." But Amaya knew better. She could see the truth. Panic hid behind Alora's smile, just as Amaya had seen earlier in the kitchen. The fact that Alora was trying so hard to laugh it off only confirmed Amaya's worst fears. Archer tried to diffuse the tension. "Amaya," he said with forced cheer, "do you need help with dessert?" Amaya narrowed her eyes, her voice cool and deliberate. "No, Archer. I think Alora should help me this time." The room fell silent. Alora's fork clattered against her plate, her expression a mask of barely concealed fear. Reluctantly, she rose from her chair, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. Amaya stood slowly, her heart pounding, as she followed Alora toward the kitchen. This was no longer just about suspicion. It was about uncovering the truth, and Amaya was ready to tear through the lies, no matter the cost. The kitchen door swung shut behind them with a soft click, sealing Amaya and Alora in tense isolation. The hum of conversation from the dining room felt distant, like a world Amaya no longer belonged to. She could feel her pulse thrumming in her ears as she turned to face Alora. "We're alone now," Amaya said, her voice low and controlled. "So tell me the truth. How long?" Alora stood frozen, her hands twisting nervously. "Amaya, I don't know what you're—" "Don't!" Amaya snapped, cutting her off. "No more lies. I saw the way you looked at each other. I saw everything." Alora's eyes filled with tears, her voice unsteady. "It just happened. I didn't mean—" Amaya stepped closer, her fists clenched at her sides. "How long?" she demanded again, her voice as sharp as a knife. Alora looked down at the floor, as if the weight of her guilt was too heavy to bear. "A few months," she whispered. Amaya staggered back, as if the words had struck her physically. The betrayal, once a shadowy suspicion, now stood before her, stark and undeniable. The air between them felt suffocating, thick with years of broken trust and shattered loyalty. And Archer? Amaya whispered, her voice trembling with rage and sorrow. Does he love you? Alora bit her lip, hesitating. Her silence was answer enough. Amaya's heart cracked wide open, her emotions swirling into a storm too fierce to contain. She had given everything to her husband and trusted her sister with her heart, and they had both betrayed her. Alora reached out, desperate to make amends. Amaya, please, I never wanted to hurt you. Amaya recoiled, her expression twisting with disgust. Don't touch me, she hissed, her voice filled with venom. For a long, agonizing moment, the two sisters stood in silence. Amaya could hear the faint hum of laughter from the dining room, a cruel reminder of the facade that had masked this betrayal. And then, just as Amaya was about to say more, Archer's voice cut through the quiet from the other side of the door. Amaya? Everything okay in there? Amaya straightened, her expression hardening into a mask of cold fury. No, everything was not okay. Not by a long shot. With one final withering glance at Alora, Amaya turned toward the door. Stay here, she said quietly, her voice like ice. I'm not finished with you. As Amaya opened the door and stepped back into the dining room, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This Thanksgiving would be the last one her family would ever share, the same way, again. Amaya stepped back into the dining room, her heart pounding like a war drum. The festive cheer that had once filled the room now felt like a cruel joke, mocking her. She scanned the table, her gaze settling on Archer, who was already watching her with a mixture of confusion and thinly veiled concern. Amaya, is everything okay? Archer asked cautiously, his attempt at normalcy brittle and fragile. Amaya didn't respond right away. She moved slowly, deliberately, back to her seat, her mind swirling with everything she had just learned. The room fell into an uneasy silence, family members sensing that something had shifted in the atmosphere, though they couldn't yet put their finger on what. Archer leaned forward, trying to maintain the appearance of control. Amaya, let's just get through dinner. We can talk about whatever's bothering you later, okay? Amaya locked eyes with him, her gaze cold and unwavering. No, Archer, she said, her voice sharp and steady. We're going to talk about it now. The table fell silent. Forks and knives stilled midair, and all eyes turned to Amaya. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but there was no going back. She was done pretending. Alora, Amaya said, her voice carrying across the room like a warning shot. Do you want to tell them, or should I? Alora emerged slowly from the kitchen, her face pale and drawn, as if the walls were closing in around her. She looked at Archer, panic flashing in her eyes, but he was already frozen in place, his charm crumbling under the weight of the moment. I don't know what you mean, Alora stammered, her voice weak and trembling. Amaya's lips curled into a bitter smile. Still lying, huh? After everything? Archer shifted uncomfortably, his hands clenching into fists beneath the table. Amaya, don't do this. Not here, not now. Why not? Amaya shot back, her voice rising. You didn't care about the time or the place when you decided to betray me, did you? Gasps echoed around the room. Forks clattered against plates. Her parents exchanged stunned glances, confusion, and disbelief etched into their faces. Alora looked as if she might collapse under the pressure, her eyes darting between Amaya and Archer, desperately searching for an escape. Amaya, please, Alora whispered, her voice cracking. This isn't the way to... Don't you dare tell me how this is supposed to go. Amaya interrupted, her fury bubbling to the surface. The two of you thought you could sneak around behind my back and I'd never find out. Did you think I'd just sit there smiling like an idiot while you humiliated me? Archer stood abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Amaya, that's enough. But Amaya wasn't finished, not even close. She turned her attention to Archer, her voice filled with years of pent-up anger and heartbreak. How long, Archer? How long have you been sneaking around with my sister? Archer hesitated, guilt and fear flashing across his face. That fleeting moment of indecision told Amaya everything she needed to know. It doesn't matter, Archer said at last, his voice strained. It's over now. It didn't mean anything. Alora flinched as if she'd been slapped, the sting of his words cutting deep. Amaya caught the flicker of pain in her sister's eyes and felt a cold satisfaction bloom inside her. Good. Let them suffer. Let them feel just a fraction of the agony they had caused her. It didn't mean anything, Amaya repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. That's your excuse? Archer ran a hand through his hair, his frustration mounting. Look, I made a mistake, okay? It was stupid, but we can fix this. We can move past it. Amaya shook her head slowly, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. Do you think we can fix this? She looked at Alora, then back at Archer, her expression hardening. You don't even understand what you've done. Her mother finally found her voice, though it trembled with shock. Amaya, what's going on? What is this about? Amaya turned toward her parents, her gaze unflinching. It's about betrayal, about my husband and my sister. She took a breath, steadying herself. They've been having an affair. The revelation hit the room like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the air, and a clink of utensils falling against porcelain rang out like a chorus of disbelief. Amaya's parents sat frozen, as if someone had pulled the ground out from under them. Alora sank into the nearest chair, covering her face with her hands, while Archer stood rigid, his jaw clenched in frustration and shame. You've ruined everything, Amaya whispered, her voice low but laced with venom. Everything we built, everything I thought we had, it's gone, all because of the two of you. Archer's hands balled into fists at his sides. Amaya, I told you, it didn't mean anything. It meant something to me. Amaya screamed, her voice shattering the thin veneer of civility that remained. It meant everything to me. The room plunged into stunned silence, the weight of Amaya's words settling heavily on everyone present. Alora sobbed quietly, and Archer looked as though he wanted to disappear. Amaya stood still, her chest heaving with the effort of keeping her emotions in check. This was her breaking point, the moment everything fell apart. And now, standing amid the wreckage of her life, she realized there was no turning back. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft sobs that escaped Alora's lips. Archer stood like a man cornered, his usual confidence drained, replaced by guilt and fear. Amaya's parents remained stunned at the revelation, their faces etched with disbelief and devastation. Amaya's rage had simmered for so long that it now left behind a cold, hollow emptiness. She looked around the room at the people she once considered family, feeling like a stranger among them. Every glance, every unspoken word was a reminder that the life she had known was over. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to let it burn. Nervous shifts in their seats confirmed what she already knew. Her world would never return to what it had been. Archer tried to regain some semblance of control. Amaya, we can work through this, he said, his voice low, as if pleading for mercy. I made a mistake. It was stupid, and I regret it. Please, let's not destroy everything we have. Amaya let out a bitter laugh. Destroy everything we have, Archer? You already did that the moment you crawled into bed with my sister. Alora's head shot up at Amaya's words, her face pale and streaked with tears. Amaya, I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. It just happened. I didn't know what to do. Amaya rounded on her, her voice sharp as a blade. You didn't know what to do? Here's a thought. How about not sleeping with my husband? Alora flinched, guilt and shame written all over her face. Archer stepped between them, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. Please, both of you. This isn't helping. We need to calm down and figure this out. But Amaya was done listening. The betrayal had twisted itself deep into her soul, poisoning every memory, every moment she had shared with the two people who were supposed to mean the most to her. There was no fixing this. There was no going back. No, Archer, Amaya said, her voice deadly calm. You don't get to tell me to calm down. You made this mess, you and Alora, and now you're going to live with the consequences. Archer clenched his jaw, frustration flashing in his eyes. You think throwing all of this out in front of everyone helps? We could have dealt with this privately, Amaya. We didn't need to make it worse. Worse? Amaya, she echoed incredulously. You think this could be any worse? She gestured toward her parents, who sat shell-shocked, and the scattered remnants of the Thanksgiving feast. Look around, Archer. Do you think there's anything left to salvage? She let out a long, ragged breath, her entire body trembling with the weight of what had just transpired. The laughter and warmth that had filled the house earlier now seemed like distant memories, buried under the rubble of betrayal. Her parents remained seated at the table, stunned into silence, struggling to comprehend the chaos that had just unfolded. Amaya's mother finally spoke, her voice soft and tentative. Amaya, sweetie, what just happened? There must be some kind of misunderstanding. Amaya turned toward her, her expression as cold as stone. There's no misunderstanding, Mom. Archer and Alora betrayed me. They've been having an affair for months. Her father, ever the peacemaker, cleared his throat. Amaya, maybe you can talk to him. Sort this out. People make mistakes. Amaya's eyes narrowed, her voice sharper than before. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice they made over and over again. Her parents exchanged helpless glances, realizing there was nothing they could say to make things better. Amaya felt the walls closing in on her, the weight of her emotions pressing down, until it became unbearable. She couldn't stay in that room, couldn't bear to see the pity in her parents' eyes or the wreckage of the life she had built. Without another word, she turned on her heel and marched toward the kitchen. Slamming the door behind her, Amaya braced herself against the counter, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had shed enough tears for Archer. He didn't deserve any more. Her gaze drifted toward the knife block on the counter. The glint of the steel blade under the dim light sent a dark thought spiraling through her mind. She gripped the counter harder, her knuckles turning white. This can't go on. I won't let them win. The thought echoed in her mind like a mantra, growing louder with each passing second. They had taken everything from her, her love, her trust, her dignity. Now, all that remained was the raw, unrelenting anger burning inside her. Amaya closed her eyes, trying to steady her thoughts, but the more she tried to calm herself, the more the rage bubbled to the surface, threatening to consume her whole. She could still hear Alora's voice, pleading for forgiveness. She could still see Archer's smug expression, as if he believed he could talk his way out of anything. A sudden knock at the kitchen door jolted her from her thoughts. Amaya stiffened, her breath catching in her throat. "Amaya," her mother called softly from the other side. "Please come out. We're worried about you." Amaya wiped her eyes quickly, composing herself. "I just need a minute," she replied, her voice hoarse. There was a pause, then the sound of footsteps retreating down the hall. Amaya exhaled slowly, leaning back against the counter. The silence of the kitchen wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, thick and oppressive. Her gaze returned to the knife block. Her hand hovered over the largest knife, her fingers twitching slightly. But just as quickly as the thought had come, Amaya pulled her hand back, shaking her head. "Number not like this. Not yet." Instead, she grabbed a dish rag, twisting it tightly in her hands as if it were a lifeline. She needed to think. She needed to plan. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Amaya inhaled deeply, a cold, dangerous calm settling over her once again. She had reached her breaking point, but she wouldn't crumble. Not now. Because if there was one thing she knew with absolute certainty, it was this. The people who betrayed her would pay, and she would make sure they never saw it coming. Amaya emerged from the kitchen, her expression unreadable, but the storm inside her raged quietly. Her parents sat in the living room, casting anxious glances toward her, but she offered no reassurances. The damage was done, and there was no point pretending everything could be fixed. She moved through the house like a ghost, ignoring the remnants of dinner that remained on the table. Plates and glasses sat abandoned, candles flickered low, and the faint hum of conversations echoed in her memory. Only now, it all felt like background noise. Amaya stood at the front window, her hands resting on the sill, staring into the darkened street beyond. The weight of the night pressed in around her, but she felt no fear, no sorrow, just a hollow stillness. She didn't know where Archer and Alora had gone, and she didn't care. They had left together, walking out of her life, leaving her alone to pick up the shattered remains. Yet, as she stood there, an eerie sense of peace settled over her. Cold, unforgiving absolute. For the first time in months, there were no more shadows lurking in the corners, no more whispers behind her back, no more painful suspicions gnawing at her soul. The truth had been dragged into the light, raw and ugly, and now, all that remained was what she would do with it. The faint crunch of tires on gravel yanked her from her thoughts. Amaya's eyes flicked toward the driveway, just as Archer's car crept back up the path. Her heart pounded, but her expression remained blank, her emotions locked behind a wall of steel. The front door creaked open. Archer stepped inside first, looking weary and drawn, his usual confident air replaced with something that resembled regret. Alora followed closely behind him, her eyes red from crying. They hesitated in the doorway, shifting uncomfortably, unsure whether they were stepping back into their old lives or walking straight into the storm they had created. Amaya didn't move from the window. She didn't turn. She didn't speak. Archer cleared his throat, awkwardly breaking the silence. "Amaya, we came back to talk. Can we sit down, please?" Amaya's gaze remained fixed on the glass, her reflection barely visible against the night. "What's there to talk about?" Alora fidgeted beside Archer, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Amaya, I know you're angry. I know we hurt you." "You didn't just hurt me," Amaya interrupted, her voice quiet but razor sharp. "You broke me." Archer took a hesitant step forward. "We know, and we're sorry, but we want to make things right." Amaya finally turned. Her eyes locked onto him with such an intensity that he faltered mid-step. "Do you think you can make this right?" she asked, her tone dangerously calm. You think sorry can undo what you've done? Archer rubbed the back of his neck, his gaze dropping to the floor. I don't know what else to say. I made a mistake, Amaya. We both did. Amaya let out a sharp, bitter laugh. A mistake? She took a slow step forward, her voice dripping with disbelief. You didn't trip and fall into bed with her, Archer. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Every time it happened, it was a choice. Alora flinched. Amaya, please. Amaya cut her off with a single glare. Don't. The air in the room thickened, suffocating with the weight of everything left unsaid. Archer took another step forward, his hands reaching out as if to close the distance between them. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice strained. Forgiveness? An apology? Do you really think I don't regret this? Amaya exhaled slowly, tilting her head, studying him like he was something foreign, something unrecognizable. You want forgiveness? Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more force than a scream. You want me to pretend this never happened? Archer's shoulders sagged. I don't expect you to forgive me, he admitted. But I love you, Amaya, and I want to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. Amaya's laugh was colder this time, sharper, cutting through him like a blade. Love, she echoed, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. She took one last step forward, closing the space between them. Then, in a voice as steady as death itself, she whispered, You have no idea what love is. Don't love me, Archer. If you had, this never would have happened. The silence stretched unbearably long, the tension in the room coiling tighter with every second. Alora stood frozen, looking as though she might shatter under the weight of it all. Finally, Amaya took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Do you love her? Archer blinked, startled by the question. What? You heard me? Amaya said, her eyes boring into his. Do you love her? Archer's hesitation was brief, but it was enough. Amaya saw the answer written plainly on his face before he could even open his mouth. I don't know, he admitted quietly. Amaya's chest tightened, the final thread of hope snapping inside her. It was worse than she had imagined. It wasn't just an affair. It was something more, something that could never be undone. She stepped back, her voice calm, but laced with finality. You need to leave. Archer's brow furrowed. Amaya. Both of you, she said, her voice firm. Leave. Alora's eyes filled with fresh tears, but she said nothing. Archer, too, seemed lost for words. Realizing there was nothing left to salvage, he reached for his coat, moving slowly, as if hoping Amaya would change her mind at the last second. She didn't. Without another word, Archer and Alora slipped out the door, leaving Amaya standing alone in the cold silence of the house. The finality of it settled over her like a weight, pressing down on her chest. Amaya turned back toward the window, watching as Archer's car disappeared down the street. The storm inside her had settled, but in its place, a cold resolve took root. This wasn't the end, not by a long shot. The night crept in, bringing with it a deep, chilling stillness. Amaya sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the edge of her wine glass, lost in thought. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had happened. Inside, Amaya's life lay in ruins, every moment of betrayal echoing in her mind. She couldn't stop picturing them, Archer and Alora together, laughing behind her back, sharing stolen moments. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the deceit, the ease with which they had torn her world apart. They had left her broken, and now they expected her to move on. But she couldn't. She wouldn't. Amaya's gaze drifted back to the knife block. The largest knife gleamed under the soft kitchen lights, a silent invitation. She reached for it, gripping the handle tightly, her knuckles white with tension. The cold steel felt grounding, a lifeline amidst the chaos. A voice in the back of her mind whispered, "This is how it ends. This is how you take back control." But just as quickly, Amaya shook her head, setting the knife down. Not like this. Not yet. She needed a plan, something that would make them feel every ounce of the pain they had inflicted. This wouldn't be over until they knew what it was like to lose everything. Amaya rose from the table, her movements deliberate and calm. She wouldn't act impulsively. Not this time. This time, she would take control. And when the time came, they wouldn't see it coming. The next morning, Amaya woke with a strange sense of clarity. The events of the previous night were no longer raw, but settled like a wound, scabbed over. She knew what needed to be done. The decision sat heavily on her chest, but it was also oddly comforting. She picked up her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through her contacts. She found Alora's number first. Without hesitation, she blocked it. Then she did the same for Archer. It was symbolic, but it gave her the first taste of power she had felt in months. Amaya moved through the house with quiet purpose. She packed Archer's belongings into suitcases, stacking them neatly by the front door. Every photo, every memento of their life together, she placed in a box and shoved it deep into the garage. Erasing him from the house was like exorcising a ghost, a necessary step in reclaiming her space. Thanks for watching True Crime Cases.